Well, it's your favorite Al again, the Purple People's Al, back at you. Well, tonight, well, today, tonight, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, I'm glad you joined us to listen in. Tonight, I want to talk about activism and being an activist. You know, there's a lot of hoopla online about what it means to be an activist. You know, a lot of people think that an activist is just somebody that, or someone that just goes out there and, you know, raises a ruckus. And after they raise a ruckus, well, the, the government changes their ways and all is right with the world. And everyone lives happily ever after. Well, I think if we've been around longer than perhaps like 12 years on this planet, we know that things don't quite exactly pan out that way. Well, therein lies the problem. We have what I would consider as progressives, a lot of different activists. And don't get me started, the conservatives, they have activists too. I just don't agree with them. So this is not really for them. Well, there's many activists that are progressive. Many activists do, well, different things. And there's this whole hoopla online as far as who should be the voices we center and who gets to do the activism and who gets to just be the ally or participate through solidarity or whatever some of these individuals think that other individuals should or should not do. And I'm thinking to myself, well, this is really a problem to have if you really don't have any other problems to solve. And, well, we're far from the point where we don't have any other problems to solve. I mean, there's no shortage of issues, so there should be no shortage of activists and different tactics that different people use. I can name a few things that are problematic that need to get solved. Food insecurity in inner cities, testing of chemicals and products on animals, you know, that they consider to be research, but it's really animal experimentation. That's an issue. Not very many people or individuals focus on it, but it's an issue. Big shout out to PETA and a lot of the animal rights organizations that do focus on that. Here, well, I won't say where, but there's some primates that are being experimented on currently at major universities and institutions. It doesn't make the nightly news. And there's not too many advocates that say, hey, you can't stick all of that poison in the monkeys or in the gorillas, you know? Not too many glossy cameras around, snap photos and do interviews with people that do that kind of work. But I digress. There's a whole conversation online, well, you know, on the webs, about canceling people because, well, they're either too privileged or they're not really black or they don't really support black liberation or they're not the voices that we need to center right now or any other argument or, you know, tit for tat. And I go and I think, well, all of these things are kind of valid. All of these things are kind of useful to know and to be aware of. But in any type of conflict or operation, as you call it, Some people would call it a war. I consider it a war. Definitely an operation. Well, in any type of war or operation, the object is to win, and the goal is addition and not subtraction. Now, I would talk about our adversaries, and I will for one moment, just to point out that you don't ever really hear, well, places like the Heritage Foundation or, the Three Percenters or the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers say, you know what, that post you wrote highlighting and glorifying Nazism, highlighting and glorifying racism in the Confederacy. Well, that's not Confederate enough. That's not Nazi enough. So you don't get to be in our group. You don't get to advocate or try to make sure that your ideology comes to fruition. No, you get to sit on the back bench. Or you just shut up over there and you're not the person we want to hear from. No, too bad. Our adversaries don't operate like that because they know that they're in an operation in war where everything is about addition and not subtraction. So all I would say is this. If we're in an operation in a war, which we're in, then we can't really be subtracting people. We can't really be telling people, well, your voice is not heard. Because, somebody like me might reach somebody that you wouldn't usually pay attention to any of these things. Somebody that is naturally accustomed to suburban life might appeal more to suburban people than somebody from the inner city who doesn't know much about suburbia. And you gotta think, cross-cultural communication is a real thing. There's a lot of people that immigrate to the United States that have no idea about the dark history of slavery, racism, and the shit that goes on in inner cities towards the impoverished and the marginalized communities. They get over here and they just want to open up a business, go to work, make money, send money, remittance back home to their family. They don't know any of this shit that happens in the United States. They're not really part of it. They're not plugged into the system. Who's going to speak to them? Somebody that knows all the issues but can't cross-culturally communicate? No. So you need a whole range of people, a whole litany of activists that can broach the divide, speak to people that other people can't reach. Sometimes people like seeing people that they're familiar with. They tend to open up their ears and listen more. They might not agree. They might still end up hating you. But at least they're willing to listen. And that's where we're at. Remember, 70 plus million people voted for a Nazi in Donald Trump, not 5 to 6 months ago. That's 70 plus million people that, well, they need to start listening to something other than racism, bigotry, and white supremacy. And who are we to tell people, well, if you come through this on-ramp, you don't get to hear this voice. Well, that might be the only voice that they consider, or that might be the on-ramp that they choose. We gotta have multiple on-ramps with people, because the last thing we want is people joining the Confederacy, joining white supremacy, aligning with Nazism, or maybe not even joining it, but on our side getting discouraged, saying, you know what, if people don't want me in this fight, then this fight isn't for me. And that'd be the last thing we need in an operation in a war. People that would agree with us, that stand with us, that actually vouch for us, and are down with the struggle, but are so deflated, their morale so lowered by commentary, by opinions, by critiques, whether fair or unfair critiques. If we're going to say a lot of negative things about people, person showed up, at least they were there. Because there were a lot of people that didn't show up. And showing up is, well, that's half of the war. That's half of the battle. And for all those people that did show up, there should be some gratitude. There should be some thanks. Whatever role they played, whatever part they played, it was significant. It was significant in the overall scheme of things. And that's what we have to keep in mind. Activism is broad, and we shouldn't try to too much police it. Everybody has their role to play. And you know what? Everybody's playing their role. And the main thing is, when the real thing goes down, we want to have the people that's actually down with the struggle with us. It's a game of addition, not subtraction. That's the way I look at activism anyway. But that's just the Purple People's House opinion. And everybody is entitled to their opinions.